Hi friends! Good morning. I thought I would share with you some of the dishes that I talked about with you in my last video. If you didn't have a chance to see that, then I will put the description for that, the link to that, in the description box below. So I was very happy to have gotten some feedback from friends about the first video, and Mary had requested a simple recipe, so we're going to show you the last stage of putting together a Greek green bean salad. And then I'm also going to show you some of the last stages of assembly before I put some of the dishes into my oven here, so you can get a chance of some of the ways that I was using these Misfits box ingredients for this week. So the green bean salad recipe is extremely easy, and especially I think a good one for someone who is still considering themselves to be learning. So I pulled together a very simple Greek dressing based on a recipe from the Little Foods Mediterranean cookbook, and it is olive oil, lemon juice, 1 clove of garlic, a tablespoon of dill, and salt and pepper. So I just mix it up. And then pour it over. And toss. And let that marinate. Now, if you'd like something that's a little bit more dressed up, the recipe does call for adding a little bit of feta cheese if you would like to, but if you are following a vegan diet, there's no reason for you to add feta cheese to this. It's perfectly lovely just the way it is. I have some sauce for my pastitsio bubbling away there on the stove. So the next thing that I wanted to show you is my baked Gigante beans in a Greek style. And I was very happy that my local Greek deli did have some of the Gigante beans, and I had soaked these and then cooked these. And I'm going to add a tomato sauce over the top of them before we bake them. I had some tomatoes that I had frozen that I had gotten from the Japanese market near mine, that they had a dollar table and there were a number of bags of tomatoes. So I froze those, and I was really happy to discover that in addition to the way that people often take the skins off of tomatoes, where they will put them into boiling water to make it easier to take the skins off, that if you freeze the tomatoes, it's actually very easy to get the skins off the tomatoes when you take them out of the freezer. So that's what I did, and then I put those frozen tomatoes into a blender, and I put them with some olive oil, some onion, which I had sauteed ahead of time, some garlic cloves, some sugar, a little bit. I didn't have parsley, so I added some coriander, and then some dried oregano and salt and pepper to taste. And so I am just going to pour this sauce over the top of the tomatoes. And the tomato sauce is that sort of pinkish sort of peach color because the tomatoes were aerated as I blended them in the blender. And then I will mix this up. And then I will bake this at, I think it's 350 degrees, or until the much of the liquid is evaporated. And that is all there is to that one. have seen recipes that have called for adding as much as a cup of olive oil to that tomato sauce. But I like that this recipe is a lower oil recipe. We'll see how that turns out. And I decided to combine two recipes to make stuffed peppers. So if you look at the Greek vegan recipe that I had put into the link of the last video, this is that they're already filled already. But rather than using the rice recipe that came with the stuffed pepper recipe as it was originally printed, what I decided to do was to fill them with the chickpea and rice recipe that is also on the same website, because I wanted to make this something that was a full entree that would have protein. So this recipe, I also did a further substitution, which I used split chickpeas instead of standard chickpeas because they cook quicker. So what I did is I took some brown basmati rice, about a cup. I took about a cup of the split chickpeas, and I cooked those together, and after I soaked them a little bit. And they cook at about the same rate, which is also very convenient. And I added some vegetable bouillon to them. I added about a cup of the cooked chopped onions that I had sauteed ahead of time. What I did with this cooking session was I actually cooked up 3 onions chopped in olive oil all at once. And that was very helpful with the prep, because a number of these recipes called for onions as well as garlic and dill, the 3 aromatics of the Greek cuisine, and so that made it easier then to be able to pull these recipes together. This mixture also calls for garlic, salt, pepper, dill, and some cinnamon, as well as some tomato paste. So I cooked that all down like I would as if I were making a pilaf, and then I filled the peppers with that mixture. So then what I thought was interesting about this recipe is that it calls for cooking the peppers just in hot water rather than cooking them in a tomato sauce, covered in a tomato sauce. So I'm just going to fill them the container part of the way, and then I'm going to bake these in a, what is it called? I think it's a 375 degree oven. Let me double check that. Yes, 375 degree oven. And those are going to be covered as they're baked. And the last dish that I'm going to assemble and bake, just as we're talking, make sure that I preheat my oven, is to put together our pastitsio. So right now, I had made together a tomato sauce, and I added to this tomato sauce some ground soy chunks. There's a Nuterra soy chunks that's available in Indian grocery stores to make sort of a soy crumbles kind of mixture, but also I added some brown lentils that were also cooked and partially pulsed, so that they would also have that kind of texture. I wanted to have a mixture, kind of chewy texture and kind of that kind of lentil-y kind of texture. And I am using the Ina Garten pastitsio recipe, and her tomato sauce has onion, which I cooked down. I used that sauteed onion that I told you about. I didn't have red wine, so I used some Chinese cooking wine, but I think red wine definitely would be better. So a couple cloves of garlic, some cinnamon, some oregano, and some thyme, and a little bit of cayenne, along with the frozen tomatoes, another 4 or 5 frozen tomatoes that I blitzed up into the blender. Now, the second stage of this recipe, it calls for adding my penne pasta to my tomato sauce. And mixing that up. So what I thought was interesting, in the past, when I have made pastitsio, I have made it with a Greek pasta. But actually, when I went to the Greek deli, they didn't have any of that pasta. The only pasta that they had was actually a penne pasta. So then I thought that that was an invitation for me to use the penne that I had in my kitchen. And the pasta that I had was some whole wheat pasta. So I decided to use that. So I'm going to now once again kind of combine 2 recipes, because I had said that I had seen a cauliflower moussaka recipe, and I thought that that was nice for adding some additional vegetables to the recipe. So what I have done here is I have parboiled the cauliflower, and then I have chopped it up, sliced it up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to intersperse a layer of my meat, my lentil soy mince pasta, with a layer of sliced cauliflower, and then, as per our Ina Garten's recipe, I have a bechamel sauce that I made up ahead of time, and I'm going to pour that over the pasta, tomato sauce mixture and the cauliflower mixture, and like with a lasagna, I'm going to intersperse. So with this cream sauce, I did a traditional sort of cream sauce recipe of butter and flour roux, and then adding some half and half, about a quarter of half and half to that, with some salt and pepper and some nutmeg. And then the recipe, Ina Garten's recipe, called for casseri cheese, a Greek cheese, but the deli did not have that cheese. So what the deli counter person then recommended that I could actually use a Greek cheese called Methatra cheese, that would be a briny cheese that would be similar to the casseri cheese. So I felt confident making that substitution then with that recommendation. So as you can see now, I have added the bechamel to that layer, and then I am going to cover that layer with the remaining pasta mixture. It's fine that they mix a little bit. Ina Garten's recipe actually encouraged to add some of the pasta sauce to the bechamel mixture, so it's fine if they mix a little bit. Add the remainder of the cauliflower. And we're going to be able to fit that into here. we're in good shape. And then top it with the remainder of our bechamel mixture. And there's my oven timer. And then we're going to top it with about half a cup or so of this grated Massatra cheese. My apologies to any Greek friends who actually know how that's supposed to be pronounced. And then this will go into a 350 degree oven. So even though I won't be able to show you the final product, I hope you try these recipes for yourselves. And also I'm going to include a link to a very helpful aromatics combination chart I talked about in the last video. If you're already including celery and carrots and onions in your grocery trips, then you're already doing this without maybe having a sense of why. And if you, whenever you cook Chinese food, if you also are pulling together some garlic, ginger, and green onion, then that's also one of those combinations you see on the chart. This will expand into other culinary traditions to give you a sense of some of those other aromatic traditions that you could have at hand when you're doing your menu planning. So thank you for joining me here this morning, and please include in the comments any sort of dishes that you would like me to try in the future, and also include in the comments if you tried any of these recipes and how they turned out for you. I will include the actual recipes with the specific details in the detail box below. Have a great weekend.